right, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate you joining this free masterclass session brought to you by ScarStack Solution Inc. My name is Olu. Some of you already know me. I have some few students currently in my training in this particular session. We just started off a new training with me, and I have some people who just finished as well. Thanks everyone for joining. For today's free masterclass, I believe this is about like the 5th masterclass I'm holding on the cloud, starting off from back in, I believe November last year. So thanks once again, everyone, for joining. I try to do this at least maybe once a month and, just teach something nice, cool, and new, across different disciplines, not just within the cloud, but also in data analytics, DevOps, Scrum, and other fields such as software engineering. Today, we're going to be focusing mainly on virtual desktops and cloud machines, and we're going to be performing some, few tips and tricks in there. We're also going to be migrating a database from a particular on-premise environment to the cloud environment. So without further ado, just give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen in a few seconds. I'm just going to get this background ready for everyone. I will kick off very shortly. Meanwhile, as the webinar kicks off, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to unmute your mic to ask. You can also use the raise your hands button as well to ask questions, or you could also share questions through the chat session right there within your Zoom. And once that's done, definitely let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, so we're going to kick off here quite shortly. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to start off with a few tips and tricks. I'm going to first introduce you to the Azure Cloud solution. For some of us who might be a little bit new to the cloud field, we're just going to talk a little bit about introduction into the cloud, and I'm going to be using one of my practical learning guides that I use for my students. So pretty much, there are a few tools here and there, but, one of the coolest things about the cloud is majority of your work, can be done inside what we call an Azure Cloud Portal. And over here, the tools listed here, some of them actually work alongside the Azure portal. So you have tools like your Azure Data Studio that basically works, with your database, right? So this would be an alternative to something like your SQL Server Management Studio. Except when it comes to the Azure Data Studio, the Azure Data Studio actually also gives you leverage and access to your cloud database systems, as well as for those who are in the analytics, especially cloud analytics field. If you are aware of Azure Synapse Analytics as well too, you can access your data warehouse databases, from Azure Synapse through Azure Data Studio. It can also be used for other advanced sort of operations, such as database migrations and so on and so forth. And then you also have what we call our Azure Bastion, which basically lives inside our Azure Portal Studio, but a very, very powerful tool for sort of, accessing your remote servers remotely, be it a Linux virtual machine, or even a Windows virtual machine. And then we have our Azure command line interface as well too, which gives us the leverage of writing command line interface script commands. We can do that using our Azure CLI itself by launching it locally within your computer, or you can also use it within your PowerShell or Bash environment within what we call the Azure Cloud Shell environment. So we have other tools there, sort of the Git, GitHub, Docker. These are tools that enable operations in the cloud or assist you achieve and attain your goals in the cloud, especially when it comes to working on Azure services that are platform as a service. And you also have your Azure Cloud Shell here, which I mentioned earlier on. We have the Azure Storage Explorer that we use as a standalone application to manage services in the cloud called storage accounts. In this case, Azure Storage Account. So that's just a quick rundown or run through of the different, some of the common tools that you can expect to use within your cloud. You also have other tools like your Visual Studio Code as well also too, and the Azure DevOps that can be used together for different purposes to achieve most of your aims and goals while working as a cloud solution architect cloud administrator or cloud engineer in the cloud computing field. So without much further ado, typically within my training, I do cover, a very wide spectrum of areas, basically areas that would enable you bag any of the three main Azure certifications. And apart from just the certifications, you get an all-rounder on all of the key areas that an Azure cloud solution architect or administrator should be knowledgeable about when it comes to cloud computing. So you have places like your networking, security, databases, cloud governance, identity, storage, monitoring, Azure cloud principles and design, which is not really part of the main key areas, but sort of gives you a very, very strong background and foundation on architectures when it comes to designing for architectures, focusing on design principles within the cloud. Then you have other key areas in the cloud like your compute and of course your infrastructure as a code. So we're going to quickly do one thing over here. I'm going to quickly just introduce you just quickly, briefly. So for those of us who are a little bit new to the cloud is nothing other than the world wide web, right? A place where you can run your server stores, you can manage applications online, and you can run different sort of online content deliveries and services, such as streaming videos, operating on your web mails, as well as dealing with other office productivity softwares such as Office 365. But that's just the cloud generally, right? When we're talking about cloud computing itself, we're talking about being able to successfully use services such as databases, networks, analytics, softwares to sort of deliver computing services to people without them having to physically have or implement those resources or services. And one other big advantage of the cloud is because of that advantage, you're only going to be paying most times for cloud services that you use, right? So it's different from being in the physical world where you have to buy your physical structures, you have to pay for the manpower to set them up. If you're trying to build what we call on-premise data center, you're going to have to pay for the data center as well and maintain it physically. But the cloud takes out all of that because you have cloud service providers like Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and AWS that have remote data centers that are put in different regions all across the world, especially in the case of Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure happens to be the one cloud computing service company that has the most data centers all across the world. So they manage those, and you just come online to sort of utilize those cloud services. And those cloud services are typically broken down into three major types of cloud computing services. We have our infrastructure as a service, we have our platform as a service, and we have our structure as a service. Now, what are some of the key differences between these three main services? The infrastructure as a service basically focuses on IT infrastructures that you can rent to utilize in the cloud. Services like this are like your virtual machine, your networking, and your storages, as well as other related cloud services. Then we have the platform as a service that focuses more on you being able to manage, test, and deliver applications in the cloud. So this could be in the form of creating different web application or web service environments for developers or DevOps engineers or all other types of engineers within the cloud. You're going to be able to deploy those web applications using different mechanisms, different means, and download and deploying for different coding environments. So you're talking about Java platforms or runtime environments. You're talking about Node.js. You're talking about .NET. You have different tools to be able to not just deploy those applications, but provision them. You're also going to be able to have the advantage to scale them as well as performing testing on them, such as load testing or stress testing. And then you have the last one, which is called the software as a service. The software as a service itself focuses on the end product of a combination of a platform as a service and a infrastructure as a service, delivering specific software applications to clients or users, where they typically would pay for those software as a service using a subscription-based program. So basically, that's why it tells us here, you pay typically on a subscription base. So look at the software as a service as the completed version of deploying a application that is in the cloud and is based on a subscription basis. Examples of this are things like Netflix, things like Dropbox, if you're familiar with Dropbox, and then Salesforce. These are typical popular examples. Now, within the cloud itself, when you're a cloud solution architect, two areas you're going to be focusing mainly on are going to be the infrastructure as a service and the platform as a service. So of course, there are rare cases where you're working on software as a service, but in reality, majority of what you're going to be seeing is infrastructure and platform as a service. Another key area that has been up and coming is the serverless computing, where you're dealing with serverless and microservices resources. And over here, it's more aligned with our platform as a service, but it's just a more modernized way of managing platform as a service where you are dealing with less IT infrastructures, basically. And so it's becoming very, very popular, and I can typically or easily just show you within our cloud portal. So this is an example of what your Azure cloud platform would look like, right? Or your cloud portal. And if I were to go into my more services and I looked at somewhere like, let's wait for that to load up, and I look into what we call compute, I'm going to see that that is exactly what is broken down for me in here. I can see my infrastructure as a service, aka IaaS. I can see the platform as a service, and I can see my serverless computing, which over here is called serverless and microservices. If I want to dig deeper, because the serverless and microservices, the microservice is more or less like an architectural approach, right? And they have some container functionalities inside them, such as Kubernetes service and container apps. So when I delve deeper into the containers category here, I can see a little bit more information on more container options I can use to sort of manage and deploy applications as containers or multi-containers. So with that in mind, let us go ahead and sort of kick off this operation. So the very first thing I want to do is we're going to work on what we call a virtual desktop, right? So the key question is, what is a virtual desktop? Before I kick on, someone asked the question over here. They said, what is the difference between this class and storage network? So again, that's a little bit of a vague question, but that's kind of okay. So this class is a class that basically is a cloud solution architect class, right? So it covers all sorts of areas within the cloud that are basically focused for the cloud solution architect, such as networking, even storage, security, identity. For this class today, however, we are focusing mainly on compute, and under the version of compute, we're focusing on infrastructure as a service, meaning we're looking at virtual machines and virtual desktops. So that's the quick answer for that. However, if you continue to look out to the class, and if you go online to my website, scastacksolution.com, and you subscribe, you're going to be notified of up and coming new, future free master classes where we're going to be covering classes like security, networking, identity, and the rest. So that would be the answer for that. So we're going to kick off with virtual desktop, right? And so let's see where we actually have our virtual desktop. So I'm going to go into our services. I'm going to click the compute over here, and I can see my Azure virtual desktop over here. It falls under the category of what we call infrastructure as a services, where we can develop different types of infrastructures. Some are listed here. Some other items that are basically grouped as infrastructure as a service are placed among other categories just because they have their own stack of technologies, right, and frameworks. So they put them in different other places, such as our storage, as an example. So the virtual desktop, why is the virtual desktop useful? Now, the virtual desktop itself, it's more like a supercomputer, right? In fact, the technology itself leverages from a supercomputer. In the case of a supercomputer, I'm trying to talk about things like virtual machines, right? But why the Azure virtual desktop exists is because it's more of a simpler online platform desktop. So what that means is that it's going to look more like you having your basic Windows computer, except instead of you having your Windows computer, you have this within the cloud. Now, what are some of the advantages of having a virtual desktop? Some of us may already experience the virtual desktop. For example, in my case, when I work daily, I don't actually really open up my actual extra computer for work, right? I've been given the opportunity because I work from home. I have a virtual desktop, somewhere that I just have to remote and connect into using VPN. So I can choose to just use the my company's laptop and then connect, through my virtual desktop that I've been assigned to, or I can use my computer basically. And so companies use the virtual desktop to assign different types of users, be it their employees, be it specific administrators, be it some of their partners within the companies, so that those people can have access to a operating system without having to have it physically. And that gives the company a lot of leverage because they don't have to spend time on space. They don't have to spend time on physical setup of all of these desktops. And most importantly, it manages cost for them easily by skipping all of those different areas we mentioned. Those are just some few examples of the virtual desktop. Now, the interesting thing about the virtual desktop is, yeah, someone said they had some questions. So you just ask them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, that's fine. But the most interesting thing about the virtual desktop is that when it comes to the Azure virtual desktop, you can actually create this virtual desktops and have multiple users even log into one or more virtual desktop at the same time. Or you can choose to assign one virtual desktop to just one user. So we're going to take a look right now and see exactly what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this virtual desktop over here. And on the here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with what we call a host pool. Now, the host pool itself basically is, okay, sure, no problem. The person said they'll ask after the class. So the host pool itself basically is a handler. It's like a pool handler to manage session desktop workspaces as well as application groups and your virtual machines. But key thing to note is that the host pool is what you need to first kick off a creation or deployment of your Azure virtual desktop. And the two key areas it focuses on are your application groups and your session hosts, which in this case are called virtual machine. So let's go ahead to kick that off and see what that looks like. So over here, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to need a resource group to work with this. And I also am going to need a virtual network to also process this. Now, the virtual network simply is something that we use within the cloud to communicate between Azure services. So if you need an Azure services to sort of have some level of communication or utilize other cloud resources, you can use your virtual network. The virtual networks are also useful for setting private connection. So if you don't want a connection to be exposed out there to the world, you can also use your your virtual networks to implement that and make that happen. So the very first thing I'm going to do, even before creating that, is I'm going to quickly create a very simple and quick resource group over here. Our resource groups are logical containers. They help us manage and group different cloud resources together. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and start up this way. I'm going to call this resource group. I'm going to say this is for, say, for example, this is for the sales department. So I'm going to go sales DP, and the DP just basically signifying that's a department. And let's say this is going to be for the East region, and it's going to be for a production environment. So I'm going to go there and give this resource group a unique name over here. I'm going to give it U5T6G. And then I'm going to leave the region because that is where we want our cloud to be deployed. I'm going to hit our next tag over here. Right over here. Actually, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go to the tags. So the tags, I'm going to put in some tags. Our tags, again, they are basically metadata that make us understand the kind of cloud resources we own. So if you have a business and the business wants to understand, which team or which department owns this particular cloud resource, you can easily use a key value pair sort of implementation here where we are passing the name and then the expected value to sort of have a better business understanding. If your business is also trying to structure and understand cost within the cloud to know which teams are utilizing which resources and how to build them in a structural business structure perspective, you can also use the tags to sort of achieve that particular aim. So I'm going to quickly go over here and set this up because we don't have too much time. I'm going to go and put in an environment that signifies these cloud resources for the production environment. I'm going to also put in a cost center for the HR department for them to know which teams are using what and how to build them appropriately. I'm going to put in the project associated with this. As you know, the companies always have projects. And then I'm going to signify what specific team owns this. In this case, I'll say this belongs to a team called non-prof app dev. So I'm gonna go here. And non-prof is basically non-profits. So I'm gonna go right there, and then I'm going to initiate a review to review all of those details. Once that is good and we've provisioned everything correctly, I'm going to go ahead and deploy that specific cloud resource. And so now that that is created, I can start creating other cloud resources, and whichever cloud resource is associated with a specific team for a specific purpose, I can start grouping them inside that specific resource group. So now that that is done, I'm going to jump in here to our what we call our virtual networks. And I see that I do have one virtual network over there, but I'm going to quickly go ahead to refresh my screen so that it picks up the detail for the new resource group that we just deployed. I'm going to give that a second. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and create our virtual networks, and I've given you a little bit of background on what virtual networks are. So over here, I'm going to select the resource group because I want this virtual network to be grouped inside that specific resource group. And you can see we have two over here. I'm going to select the one that I just created. And then I'm going to go over here and give this virtual network a naming convention over here so that we can better and easily understand and what this virtual network is for and who it is for by just merely looking at the name. I'm going to go in here, put in the east, and I'm going to give it its own unique name, but I'm going to first describe over here that it's for the prod environment, and I'm going to give it a unique name here of 56RTX. And then I'm going to leave it in the east region because that is where, for example, in this case or scenario, our company, my team, and where my company wants us to create those resources. And then I'm going to go over here. There are a few more settings here. I'm going to skip the settings. They're not that important. We do have some things we call IP addresses as well too. I'm going to configure those as well. And over here, I'm going to leave this as 16. Of course, if I wanted to change that to a different range, I will do that. The IP addresses are what makes the different cloud resources, especially in the case of the virtual networks and what we call subnets, to easily have access to communicating with other different types of cloud resources. And one other advantage is by the time you're choosing what we call ranges, which gives us this /16, it opens access to multiple available addresses that these virtual networks can utilize while performing their daily or routine operations. So I'm going to leave that way. I'm going to edit the name of our subnet. But before I go ahead to do that, I'm going to quickly jump back to the basic over here. And I'm going to just copy off from the name over here so I don't have to type that all the time. Then I'm going to come over here. As you can see, our subnets can be used for different things. We can use it to set up, can use it, for example, to set up a Azure firewall. We can use it to set up a deployment for what we call Bastion, which we mentioned within the beginning of this class. So if I drop over here, I can see the different functionalities that we can use our subnet for. But in this case, we're using it for default because we want it to work with our virtual network. So I'm going to go over here and put this in as SBNet. I'm going to put that right there. And then I'm going to see all of the settings. This is the IP range for our virtual network. For our subnet, is giving us an IP range of 10.0.0/24, which gives us access to 256 addresses. I'm going to say that looks good. In certain cases, if you want to configure what we call a NAT gateway, that sort of also simplifies and secures our subnets more with the resources it might be useful for, we can set that up. But for this purpose, we're going to just leave that way. I'm going to hit save over there. I'm going to go to the next. And actually over here, we've passed this. So I'm going to go to the tags over here. And I'm going to go and put in the tag metadata details so that the business can always have a better understanding of what's going on with this specific cloud resource. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select the cost center associated. It's also for the same team as well too, because remember the resource group where most of these resources are going to be grouped under was also for this cost center. So we are on track so far. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to select it for that specific team member, which is the div, or rather the nonprofit. So with that in mind, everything looks good over here. I'm going to proceed to validate this provisioning state, and then if everything checks well, as we can see right here, we don't have any errors, I'm going to go ahead and deploy that. Now, as that's going on, I'm going to jump back over here as well too. Wait for that to get ready, and then we're going to work on creating our virtual desktop. Now, let me quickly check the update. Okay, so that has been deployed. So let's take a look at what the virtual network looks like, right? If I come in here and it opens up the virtual network, right? This is what a typical simple environment, cloud environment looks like, right? I'm looking at a cloud resource I just created over here, and it's giving me some basic details as well as further configurations that I can perform. The peering is used to sort of pair virtual networks together so they can easily communicate with each other. You also have your firewall as well too that further helps protect our cloud resource. And then there are other configurations such as our private endpoint. If I were to drop down my configuration pane over here and look at my left pane, I can see our subnet that was associated with our virtual network as well. I can also see the address spaces that we implemented for our virtual network, which is the address space of 10.0.0/16 that gave us this address range and gave us this amount of IP addresses. So far so good. That is looking very good. I'm going to navigate back here to our host pool, close this right here. And I'm going to quickly refresh this screen right here so that everything we've created can be refreshed in this particular session, since it's a different web page session. So now we are back over here, right? Very first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to kick off the create a host pool. And so let us go ahead and kick that off. Now, bear in mind, there are a few gears moving left and right to put your virtual desktop together. Usually within my training, I do show people how to move correctly so that they don't forget any individual step while creating this. So the very first thing I want to do right here is that since I've created a virtual network that this host pool is going to be utilizing, and I know that virtual network was placed under a specific resource group, which is this sales department resource group, I'm going to go ahead and select that resource group. Now, the next thing I want to do is to give this host pool its unique name. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to call this HPOL, or I can just put in an HST and make this PL. And then I'm going to say this is for a virtual desktop, and I'm going to abbreviate that simply as that. And then because this is going to be for the marketing department, I'm going to put that there, and it's for the East region, and it's for production. So I'm going to use PR. In this case, PR is standing for production. I'm going to give this host pool its own unique identifier. So in this case, this is going to be 90TYD. And so now we have that set, we're going to leave this in the East location as well too. Yes, something we call validation environment. For this, we don't really need it since this is a quick test. I'm going to leave it that way. We also have what we call our desktop and remote. These are the different types of host pool options, right? The desktop gives you more leverage and more control over what you can do. Our users can access their virtual desktop as well as the certain features they will be exposed to. So think about this in comparison with the remote app as an application where if you access, for example, a remote app such as a mobile app, where you may not have as much control over your account. So for example, if you notice some of your banking apps, there are certain sensitive operations or activities you want to perform, they'll tell you can't do this on a mobile app. Go and log in into the full website to experience the full, operations or the full options to sort of perform those sensitive tasks. And that's pretty much the difference here. So for this case, we want maximum experience. So I'm going to go ahead and select desktop. Now for the host pool type as well too, you have what we call your personal and your pooled, right? And your pooled is basically to help you manage a virtual desktop that would have multiple users, right? So that's the that's the concrete reason for calling it a pool, right? And that's why we have that called the host pool, because at large, it has the advantage of having multiple virtual machines that can be utilized by multiple users. In this case, this is a very simple test, so we're going to just go with personal. Now, the personal in this case means when you choose a personal, you can now choose to say, okay, well, I want to have full control of how many specific virtual machines I want to create. And then based off that, I'm going to decide that I want to assign that each of those virtual machines to individual users. So we're going to go ahead and select that personal. And then, the next thing we're going to look at is the assignment type, right? Now, the assignment type means when you're trying to assign this virtual desktop to users, do you want the availability of it to be automatic and thereby be taken control of by Azure, or do you want to have full control over leveraging who has access to what virtual machine? We want that direct, so I'm going to select that. Now I'm going to move to the next, which is the virtual machine. Now, even though the virtual machines are separately different from virtual desktops, the truth is behind the whole thing, the virtual machines are what the virtual desktop use in creating those computers. However, the looks and feel as well as the functionality and operation of a virtual machine and a host pool are different when you log in, right? So think of it as a virtual machine that has been configured differently to be a normal computer, while the virtual machine still has its own real world name called the virtual machine, and it can create a server machine for itself. So the host pool over here is using our virtual desktop, and the virtual desktop is using the virtual machine to create a different type of machine that is suitable for a simple business operation or daily activities. So let us go ahead and select add the virtual machine. You can choose to add it now, or you can choose to add it later. In this case, we can just go ahead and do that. Now we're going to add a name prefix that will stand for our VM's name. So over here, I'm going to call this VRT, and I want this to also sort of carry an indication that is for production. So I'm going to put PR there, and then I'm going to give it a unique name over here. So I'm going to call it 67TYD. And in this case, I can also add one more information over here for the location, and I'm going to just put this as ET. And I see I've passed that, so we're just going to put in VRTD, and that stands for virtual desktop. So the next thing over here, what type of virtual machine do we want? We're going to stick with this. We're going to leave the location as East US. Availability options over here, they are totally different type of beast. However, this class is this particular session is not for that. But for over here, I'm going to leave this as an availability zone. For the availability zone, I'm going to select one availability zone here. What this means is I'm selecting one zonal area for the cloud to put my virtual machine, aka the virtual desktop. If I were to select something like zone 1 and 2, then I'm going to be saying, oh, you know what, replicate this in a different zone, and in reality, it's going to build two virtual machines for me. But over here, I'm going to go for one. I'm going to enable these advanced features and functionalities over here. And then for the image, I'm going to go ahead and look for a viable image for this virtual desktop. So I'm going to give that a few seconds to load up. So sometimes my Safari usually hangs here a little bit. Not really sure why, but let's see if I can select something from over here. So I'm just going to use this feature over here, and I'm going to go for the best. So as you can see over here, our image is basically our operating system image, right? And again, the virtual desktop is mainly for the Windows, right? It can't be for the Linux because the Linux has no user experience, right? It's a terminal where you just mostly write scripts and operate the virtual machine or computer that way. So over here, I'm going to go for the highest one over here. And then for the size, I'm going to try to change that. Give this a few seconds. Hopefully it loads up. Okay, perfect. So over here, I see different variety of sizes I can choose from. Pretty interesting stuff. I'm going to go over here and select this. And, typically in my case here, because I have a lot of full IT trainings on the cloud, I think I'm running about 3 of them now. I just wrapped up one last week. So I tend to create a lot of virtual machines during these class sessions across the different classes. And so the cloud, if you're having a basic account, they have what they call quotas. And your quotas, if you utilize some of them, you get put at 0, and then you have to request. So let's see, if we come across that, we'll cross that border. So let me see. So now I've configured our size, and that means I'm running this virtual machine on a 3.5 gig RAM. So for the numbers of VM, again, this is where you can determine how many virtual machines you want to deploy. In this case, I'm just going to go for just one virtual machine. And then once we create that, I'm going to assign that to a specific user. So the next thing I'm going to go over here is to select the type of disk. This is your storage for your computer, right? Over here, I'm going to leave this as, I'm going to upgrade it to premium actually. And then for the size, this is the actual storage size. So you're looking at the quality of the disk as well as the actual size of the disk. Since I'm not really going to be doing anything here, I'm going to leave that as 128. As you can see, there are other sizes over there. I'm going to come down over here, and then you remember when we first kicked this off, we started off with creating a resource group, and then we'll move to creating a virtual network. Over here, I'm going to select the virtual network of choice that we created. As you can see, we have two different ones. This is the one we want to target, so I have that selected. It programmatically chooses my associated subnet with it, which is good. For the network security group, you may or may not need that, but in many cases, you want to also just put that there just as a backup in case you sort of need it. And that is just an option to open what we call different protocols for your virtual machine to work with, depending on what you want to use that virtual machine for. So over here, I'm just going to give it two important ones here. I'm going to say, give it an RDP so that I can be able to access this virtual machine through RDP, and open up an HTTP port as well too, in case we need to take this, perform some web browser activities or expose our virtual machine to a web server. So I'm going to leave that way. Now, this is one other key area in the cloud. We're going to be choosing Microsoft Entra ID here, which is basically the cloud's way of authenticating users in the cloud, right? So we're going to say select that. The other one is for on-prem or on-premises environment. So with that in mind, I have that all set up. So I'm going to now provide here my what we call an admin access. So we're creating this virtual machine, and in this scenario, we are creating this virtual machine for a business user who is a partner of the company, so that when they are working with us, we don't have to give them a personal computer, right? They can use any of their personal computers, and then they can remote into the virtual desktop of my company. That way, as the company, my company has the full control and leverage of the actual cloud computer, while we are not really wasting money in giving them a personal computer, right? And we can configure our cloud computer the way we want it. So I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to select a password. And basically what is going on over here is this password I'm putting in here is not for the user. This is for me as an admin in case I need to log in into this virtual desktop to sort of figure out any sort of issues or fix anything or adjust anything. You always want to have that leverage of being able to log in as the admin. So I'm putting that in right now. Yeah, so someone asked the question saying, I think AAD is the same as Entra ID. Yes, so AAD is the same as Entra ID. However, over here is not AAD. This is Active Directory. So Active Directory is different from Azure Active Directory. And of course, as you know, again, in the cloud, there's no such thing as the Azure Active Directory anymore. That has been removed and replaced with the word Microsoft Entra ID. But that's a very, very good question right there. Okay, so we're going to move to the next area over here. And we're going to say, so it's going to ask us to create a workspace. So in this place, I want to create a workspace. I'm going to go ahead and select this now. What does the workspace do? What does the workspace do? Workspace basically creates a workspace environment for us to be able to launch what we call a session desktop that is self-hosted inside what we call an application group. And all of this is all happening within our virtual desktop Azure service environment. They work hand in hand to make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I'm going to paste the other information I have here. So that looks good. Anytime I see this, I know this workspace belongs to this specific configuration over here. And I'm going to put VRTD to indicate, of course, that it is for virtual desktop. It doesn't really matter anyway, because this workspaces are going to be found typically within the Azure virtual desktop environment. So you can leave that there or take it out when creating that. You just pay attention to the details and see what works for you and the organization you're with. So I'm going to go ahead and click next since that has been enabled. And so that puts together all of the provisioning states we need for the host group. I'm going to go ahead and put in our department information and all the other metadata information we need to give this Azure resource, meaning once it's been deployed. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select production. I'm going to select cost center, provide our cost center there. I'm going to put in the project for associated with this. We're going to select that there. I'm going to select the team. And I'm going to go with the nonprofit for that. So again, we're speeding through the explanation because, we have a lot of things to cover. This is not a typical normal class. Typically, we take time to explain each step, but, this is just more or less like a master class to see how some of all these operations are performed. So now that we've put all of that together and our provisioning state looks good, we're going to go and validate and verify our settings, and then we're going to deploy this. So the validation has been passed, and I'm going to commence the deployment of this particular host pool. So this typically takes a few minutes, typically about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to let it run and operate, and I'm going to check up on it periodically. As you can see, it started the deployment process to configure and put all of those things together. Once it's complete, it's going to create our workspace for us. It's going to programmatically create what we call an application group as well. And then, of course, it's going to create our session host, which in this case is called a virtual machine, alongside the host pool. So about 4 items there that is going to create. And that is the application group. You are seeing it that it has successfully created over there. It has also created the host pool. And then these other 2 deployments are associated with our virtual machine and the workspace environment that has a session desktop within it. Okay, so let us, while that is going on, we're going to do something. I'm going to switch into Entra ID over here, which is basically categorized under the identity part of the cloud computing, which provides access control, helps with access control, utilizes technology like what we call RBAC, which is a technology that we use in assigning roles to cloud users. I'm going to go and set up the specific user that is going to, or who is going to be using this virtual machine. So the very first thing I'm going to do is to go back to my own page. And then once I'm in my own page, I'm going to go under my identity area. Wait for that to load up. Yes, someone said yes. So RBAC is for role-based access control, and you can use it alongside some other things such as the Identity Access Manager management, which is called IAM as an access control. So let us go over here, identity. So under identity, we're going to come down to our Microsoft Entra ID user over here. So I can see I'm the tenant of this particular cloud session. I can see my business information in there, my tenant ID, and all of the other cool stuff. I'm going to go ahead and quickly add a new user over here. So for this new user, I'm going to assume the user's name is, let me use Jake Tapper as an example. So we're going to say Jake.Tapper, and I'm going to quickly bring down this capital. So basically, this is going to give us a user called jake.tapper@this.com. I'm going to go over here, open up a new fresh text edit so I can store that information in there. I'm going to put that there. Then I'm going to be using a computer-generated password as well. So I'm going to be adding that in here. And then I'm going to pass in the display name for this person. And then I am going to go ahead to it next. I'm going to just put in his name here. And so typically, if you're in a company and trying to set up a cloud account for a particular new cloud user, you typically go through this route and you can fill in all of these other details, but we don't need any of that now. So I'm going to move on from there. I'm going to just add this person to an administrative unit. In this case, I'm going to add him to the California administrative unit. I'm going to also go ahead and add him to a group. This group right here, I'm going to add him, say, for example, to the DevOps group. And then I'm going to give him a high-level Azure role over here. And in this case, I'm just going to give him a global reader. So that is using what we call our RBAC, our role-based access control, to sort of give this user an eye level. Now, that role is basically just giving him eye-level roles within the portal generally. It doesn't necessarily give him access to any specific cloud resource. And then the next thing we are going to do here, someone said, give the users their login information. That's correct. And so the next thing we're going to do over here, we're going to come back in here and we're going to go ahead to deploy that. And then the next thing we're going to do over here is we're going to go and confirm that user. So I can see that user is right there over now. So everything looks good from this side. We're going to just quickly take a look at our host pool here so you can see that it's still deploying. So that's fine. That's good that it's deploying. So now that we have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and log in Jake Tapper into his new email account so that he just can verify that he has access to that. And so, but before I go ahead and do that, I also want to give him an access, right? I want him to be able to access some of the Azure cloud resources we have. In this case, I want him to access the resource group that we created when we wanted to start provisioning our virtual desktop. So for me to do that, I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to use this web portal over here. I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to go to my resource groups. I'm going to select the resource group in choice that I want. And then I'm going to do what I'm going to assign in access to this resource group. So this way, Jake Tapper would have access to all of the cloud resources that were created under this resource group. So for me to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click on our access control over here. I'm going to click add over here, and I'm going to give this person a specific role assignment using the RBAC technology. So now that we're in here, one of the first things I'm going to do, I'm going to look for the specific role I want to give you. Now, there are different types of roles you can give your users, right? Basically, these roles will play different or have different agendas for the user, right? So as an example, if you wanted to make sure that your user could just read but not really change anything, right? I can go ahead and assign him a reader role. You'll be able to view all of the resources in this resource group, but it's not going to be able to make any changes at all. Now, in this case, we want him to do a little bit much more than that. And we also want him to be able to successfully log in into this computer once it has been assigned to him. So the first thing I'm going to do is to give him one of two either roles. Because this is a virtual machine, I'm going to focus on the virtual machine roles. I can see over here, there are a bunch of virtual machine roles. Here I can see virtual admin, virtual machine administrator login, and a few other options. In this case, I'm going to say, because I want him to also stand as an administrator and as a virtual machine user login, I'll give him these two roles. So I'm going to select the virtual machine user login. So he's going to be able to view the virtual machines in the Azure portal and be able to log in as a regular user. So let's go ahead and give him that. For this, I'm going to add him. I'm going to go ahead and look for Jake Tapper over there and select him. And I'm going to hit select over there. And then I am going to hit the review and assign. Now, before I do that, I'm going to pause there a little bit. So we've not assigned him this role yet. So I'm going to make you see what the difference looks like, from the user's perspective. So I'm going to go over here and hit portal.azure.com to first log in our new user. So over here, I'm now logged in. It's asking for the credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. Then I'm going to come back in here. And then I'm going to hit the next button. Now it's asking for the password. So the user is going to pass in the password, So typically, if this was a company or something like that, once you've created this information, you send it to the user, right? A company email. Hey, welcome to the team. This is your Azure Cloud username and login. Once you're about to log in, you'll be prompted to provide your password and update your password. please follow the steps accordingly. If you've set up what we call multi-factor authentication or other forms of authentication method, you tell him, please be sure you set up your multi-factor authentication. It has a timeline expiration date, timeline expiration of about 2 weeks, this and that. You set up that business email and send it to that user. So in this case, user has received all of those emails and is about to successfully log in to his Azure portal account for the first time. It's prompted again to rewrite his password. It's providing it in there, and now he's going to create his own personal password over here. So that helps secure the account, right? And make sure that he has access to his virtual machine without me, the administrator, having an idea of that. Of course, because I'm the administrator of the portal, I can always go there to revoke his session if I was instructed to, or I have good reasons to. I can always help him reset his password as well from the portal too. So I'm going to go over here again, repeat my new password, assuming I'm the new user called Jake Tapper. I'm going to go click that. And that's that multi-factor authentication. It's requiring. We're going to bypass that because we don't need that. I'm going to hit ask later. I'm going to hit yes over here. And it's welcoming me to Azure for the first time as a new user. It gets started. It asks some basic questions. How do you plan to use it? Maybe Jake Tapper is a cloud architect as well to joining the team. So he's selecting, I'm going to use it to architect, manage, and govern my cloud solutions. Perfect. Tells the new user, take a tab, right? So now the new user is logged into his new portal for the first time using the credentials that the other administrator created for him. He's going to walk through the new portal a little bit, check out all the new fancy cool stuff. He's going to say, okay, thanks for walking me through that. It's giving him all of the steps and everything he should be aware of as a new user to the cloud. And it's telling him, finally, that's your account information. So you say, okay, that's fantastic. So you can go over here, you can see his name over there. So he knows he's logged in as the Tapper. You can go ahead to view his account to see some fantastic setup over there, including his access to his 365. Should that be set up for him? So you can go over here. Over here, you can see a few things. You can see the settings and privacy. You can change his password, look at manage devices in there. You can see his name over here as well too. And you see all of the other informations and things. If it goes under my apps, I think I put him under the DevOps group, and I think that group might have a Cisco app, but I'm not too sure. Okay, yep. So, you can see other apps that we've given him access to in the cloud as well. So let's go ahead and close that. And so Jake Tapper knows is logged in here right now, right? So if I want to see if Jake Tapper wants to see all of the resources he's been given access to, if he goes over here and he clicks all resources, it doesn't technically see anything and it's being brought back to the welcome screen, right? Let's go and look at that again. It goes ahead, it clicks it, view all resources, can't see anything at all. Now let us go back here and complete that particular deployment for that new access control role we're about to give him for that resource group. So I'm going to go ahead here and deploy that role assignment. Once that role assignment has been deployed, I can cross-check it over here under my role assignments to verify that it went through successfully. I can see over here, SCASTAC Solution, I'm the owner of this cloud. And then I can see down here that I've given Jake Tapper a virtual machine user login role for this. So if he comes back down to the, let's say, his own page right here, and it refreshes, this might take us 1 or 2 refreshes, he should be able to eventually now see some items under view or resources. So we'll do it again. Sometimes it takes some few seconds, but we'll come back to that if that doesn't show after the second refresh. So okay, it doesn't show yet, so we're just going to give it a little bit more time. Click over here. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. So now that we have that set up, now one of the things we are doing all of this for is not necessarily because we want to really see Jake Tapper log into all of that. We just have to make sure that Jake Tapper is all set up, and I'm just walking you through that example so that while we have all of our other cloud resources complete their deployments, we are not just standing and staying idle. So let's take a look at this guy. You can see it's still deploying over here. So the next thing we're going to do, we can actually see some of our virtual desktop. So let's go and pay attention to the virtual desktop. So I'm going to go to more services. Wait for that to load up. And then I'm going to go to our compute. On our compute, I am going to select our virtual desktop over here. And I'm going to go and drop down this feature. And so we can see what we call our left menu or left pane navigation menus over here. I'm going to hit the host pool. Within the host pool over here, I can see my new host pool that has been created. I'm going to go ahead and select that host pool. Within the host pool, I can see that there's one virtual machine that has been created. Once the deployment finishes, this can connect is going to change to 1 to let me know that, yes, I can connect to the one virtual machine. But for now, the deployment is still going on. So it is in the state of, this can't connect is in the state of 1. I can also see the application groups I mentioned earlier on as well too, being reflected in here. So one of the first key things I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my application group. For me to do that, I'm going to drop down the navigation pane menus over here, and I'm going to go into my application group. And I'm going to provide the users I would want to assign the virtual machine to. So in here, I'm going to select the application group. Now, this application group was what was programmed, what I mentioned earlier on, that is going to be programmatically created for our virtual desktop once we create and deploy the host pool. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to drop down the feature over here too. I can see a few configurations here. If I go into my applications, I can see the session desktop we mentioned earlier on that the user would use to launch into their virtual desktop. I'm going to go over to the assignment over here. I'm going to click the add button. Under the add button, I'm going to select the users. You can select one or more users. Eventually, once your virtual machine is created, you're going to assign that specific user from the list of users who you want. So let's just say we had a few people in mind who wanted to assign this to, and we're still trying to make up our mind. We're going to select these 2 people over here. And we're going to add them. So now there are going to be 2 user assignments for our session host. So now that I have that in mind, I'm going to close that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see what's the state of our session host. So our session host, which is for our virtual machine, looks like it's now available. So if that being said, let me take a look at our host pool to see if that's been deployed. And now we see our deployment was complete. And now we can see how long that took. It started off at 8:49, and this is 9:06. So that took about 17 minutes or thereabout. So the virtual desktop can take a few while to get deployed. So, okay, now that we know that, we're going to go into the virtual machine. Now that I'm inside the virtual machine, I am going to see all of the settings in there. I'm going to assign this virtual machine to a specific user out of the 2 users we chose. I can see our users over there. I'm giving this to Jake Tapper, so I'm going to say assign. And I'm going to say okay. So what that does is Jake Tapper becomes who? The official user or handler of this particular virtual desktop. So refresh that, close that. And if I break this down a little bit, we can see that the assigned user for this virtual machine, and otherwise the virtual desktop is Jake Tapper. Now let us quickly go back over here and check to now see if we can see, this is Jake Tapper's account. Let's see if this stuff is now working well. You see that? So after just giving it some few minutes, Jake Tapper's account has finally caught up with reality, and it is now showing over there. So I can see the virtual machine right now because we gave Jake Tapper a virtual machine user login, Azure RBAC role assignment using our access control, which is the IAM. And if I furthermore click on that virtual machine, I'll be able to see details about the virtual machine. So basically, this is what the virtual machine kind of looks like, the overview page when you create a virtual machine. So in a way, we're kind of like doubling in on deploying the virtual desktop, but also having the experience of what a virtual machine sort of looks like. So that's perfect. Now that you can see all of that detail, that is good. We're going to reduce that. That was Jake Tapper's account. Now we're back in our own main account. So let's take a look. So now we've set up a few things, right? The very first thing, we created our virtual network. We first started creating our resource group. Then we went ahead to create our virtual network. And after that, we started to provision our host pool, where we set up our virtual machine, and we also set up our workspace. And then after we completed that, we created a user account for Jake Tapper, and then we gave him a global reader high-level Azure role, and then we went to give him a specific role assignment to our resource group, and then we logged into Jake Tapper's account as well to see, what his account was doing, and then eventually we assigned him this virtual machine role. So one other key thing I need to do right here is to configure our RDP properties for our virtual machine to make sure that our RDP properties is looking good. So when I click the RDP over there, because the RDP by default is configured just as a basic setting, but we need to tell it that, hey, you know what? We are using Microsoft Entra ID to join this session. So for me to do that, I'm going to go to the advanced, and I'm going to go over here and add an extra setting in here. I'm going to say this is targets is, and I'm going to say AAD joined. And then after that, I'm going to put in a double colon with the information I, and another double colon, and say 1. So with that setting, you can see it is very similar to all of the other settings for other sort of configurations for this virtual desktop. And so with that in mind, I can go ahead to hit save over there. Let me just double check to see I wrote that correctly. Okay, that looks good. All right, so now with that saved, I think we've sort of covered all of the different configurations that we need, for this particular virtual desktop to be accessed. So let us go and quickly give it a test. Again, we're going to, before I do that, I'm going to quickly just show you some of all those background details we sort of put together. We had the workspaces. If I go to the workspace in the general tab area, I'm going to see our workspace listed there. Let's take a look at that workspace. When I click on that workspace, ready to load, we're going to be able to access our application group. When I click there, I can see my application group. So that's telling me I can see the application group from the dedicated workspace. I can also access it from the host pool, and I can also click on the application group itself by its own, and I'll see a list of application groups there, including this one we created. Of course, there's the only application group now, so we'll see only one. Should we click there, just like we see it over here? And when I click this again, I can see our applications and assignments. If you go over here, we're going to see our session desktop. Perfect. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and quickly test this. If everything has been configured correctly, we will be able to log in successfully. So I'm going to go back over here, and I want to use this environment because Azure has what it calls a single sign-on capability. And so if I were to sign in here, it will quickly recognize Jake Tapper instead of us having to open a different browser and where we have to log in all once again from the beginning. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to type in this address, aka, and I'm going to say .ms, and I'm going to say /avd web, and I'm going to hit enter. And so what do we see now? I can see my session desktop. This was the same session desktop we were just looking at over here. So I can see that right there, and I can go ahead to click on that, and you can see it is a web client, and so we're seeing the word web client over there. So I can see all of these basic settings over here, general computer settings. I'm going to say allow that. And as you can see over here, there are 2 levels of login. There's logging in into your Azure environment. So if I look at it, I can see that's Jake Tapper, but then there's going to be a second login in over here. So you can see it as pre-filled my username for me because it recognizes me from over here. So let's go ahead and put this. And let's submit. And just like that, Jake Tapper can now successfully log into his new virtual desktop. And that, in general comprises of about 12 or 13 configuration and provisioning steps you have to take to sort of make all of this work and, successfully come together. So I'm going to give that a few seconds for it to sort of load up. Does anyone have any questions so far? Feel free to put in the chat. Feel free to unmute if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have about 3 questions.
3 questions, that's good. Let's go.
Okay, all right. First of all, it was a good delivery. I like the way you deliver your lectures. This is my first time ever, into something like this.
First time?
And
Okay,
first time
good.
ever. I don't even understand some of the terms you're using except what I know from just normal desktop. So,
Okay,
but yet I was able to still follow through sincerely and
follow through. That's
keep it up,
good.
keep it up, keep it up. All right. So my question range in 3 categories. One is so now I figured out that this is just like me having my own personal PC, right? So
Exactly.
when you mentioned the virtual network, so I have my PC, which is the one I'm using now.
Yes.
In that sense, what would be the virtual network for my own personal PC? So because that will allow me to understand what you meant by the virtual network. So if I have a PC, what is the virtual network for my PC?
So the virtual network is not like an IPv4 IPv6 address that spans everywhere, right? You can have a Wi-Fi and have an IP for that. You can have your personal computer and have an IP for that. The virtual network works differently, right? In this case, we're talking about Azure Virtual Network. So its operation is basically for the cloud. You understand? So in the cloud there, the virtual network can be used for different things. For example, if you are deploying a web application, and it's not supposed to be a web application, it's supposed to be for everyone, right? It's not supposed to be like CNN or Facebook.com or Instagram.com. It's in-house, you understand, within the organization. You can set up a private network, a virtual network, so that your access to that particular web application or web resource is internal within the organization. You understand? The virtual network can also be used in cases where you want Azure resources or cloud resources to communicate with each other. And that is also internally as well too, you understand? And so you use the virtual network to set that up. The other cloud resources, when you're creating them, they would always require a virtual network because one or more of the way they operate needs the existence of a virtual network. For example, a virtual machine. You understand? So that's how the virtual network sort of works. When you take it out of the cloud context, it no longer becomes what it is in the case of like a personal computer. You understand? It's different from a personal computer. Like a personal computer will have things like firewall, right? In the cloud, we also have what we call Azure firewall. That is different. But the virtual network is why it's even called virtual. You understand? That's like the virtual machine is called virtual as well too. That is the configuration and the operation and how it sort of works. And that's just pretty much the answer to that.
All right. So the second question is on security, right? So since this is more like you said, it's a virtual desktop. So if any case this was hacked by someone, who is being affected, whose information is going to be exposed? Is it that nothing, since it is not linked to, or is it linked to the person that created the virtual desktop? So if they
not
hack
really
that
a
one, they
person.
hack me? Huh?
Not really a person, but more so, it's different from like hacking into a bank account or something like that. You understand? But yes, there are levels of compromise. There are level of how data can be compromised. You understand? It depends on what the virtual network is being used for. You understand? So not necessarily something that affects the user, but more so affects the organization. You understand? So say, for example, you've probably heard in the news within the last few months, oh, Netflix got hacked, or you understand, all of these big organizations got hacked. These are like hackers doing some sort of things that are sort of affecting it. So in the case of cloud security or the virtual network itself, virtual networks are slightly hard to sort of, you understand, to hack, right? That's why they're kind of like there to sort of prevent all of that. You get what I mean? Should that happen, it now depends on what the virtual network is being used to access and how deep that hacking goes. You understand? Again, if it's a virtual network that's tied to a virtual machine could have a database hosted. You understand? Within it. So the level of data as well as how deep that hacking goes is what sort of affects the data at large and the company at large, not necessarily an individual. You understand? Except, of course, we have personal information, say, for example, in a database in a virtual machine.
So say, for example, I log into my email on the virtual desktop, and then when it is hacked, automatically they hacked into my email, right? Because it's something that I can actually leave on. Most times, you want to leave sometimes we leave our email open on our normal desktop, and anytime you just come in, you can access it. If you do that with your virtual desktop.
So the virtual network is not necessarily used for like emails or a lot of those things, right? They are used mostly for like cloud operations. You understand, that cover even larger things than email. You get what I mean? So in this case, what did we just do? We used the virtual network to serve as a communication for the host pool using the what? Using the virtual machine. You get it? Yeah, so it's not necessarily how you kind of use it personally, although if you're using it, for example, for personal projects, then that's different, but it's not typical to like your local computer or what you have on your local computer or what you have with an email. You understand? It's more so with the cloud resources that are utilizing the virtual network. And in this case, when we created this virtual network, it can be used for multiple things, right? I can decide to deploy a firewall, and that firewall would need a virtual network that has something. Again, it's very hard, in a class like this, which is supposed to be a master class. You're not meant to really dive deep into the. You understand what I mean? The explanation, like there are people in these classes, some even just started like I think 2-3 weeks ago. They have more understanding of what that is because they've used it in the practical set. So it's just something that is a little bit hard to just grasp directly like that, through a masterclass, because it's cloud computing and compromises of a lot of different complex architectures within it. With that being said, let me quickly just show. So in case for guys over here, because I do know there are about 2 or 3 people in here that are interested and that reached out to me during the prior to this particular masterclass, and they wanted to get information. As you can see, this is my website over here, scastacksolution.com. I'm going to share that within the group. For example, you can see different architectures for the different IT trainings I do within the cloud solution architect IT training. These are going to be the key areas that typically I would sort of focus on within our cloud training, right? So we've got our compute, our identity, our IAC, governance, storage, databases, network, monitor, and of course, security. Those are the key areas. Of course, the additional things such as introduction to the cloud computing as well, where we'll talk about Azure well-architected frameworks, things that guides cloud solution architects as you work for an organization. So if you wanted to get more details about it, you can see some few people who have just finished IT trainings with me to try to upload some more experiences, looking for the time. Those are people who have finished. This one is in a data analyst role. This particular person, she's in a cloud solution architect role, got a job back in, I believe, February or thereabout. And we have Abiola here as well, also too, and a few more people. This particular person, she just finished her training not too long ago, so she's currently in interview process. I think we also have one more person here, Bambo, who is also just finished the IT training service with me. I believe not even up to 2 weeks ago, and is already having interviews. So if you want to go in there, you just click on IT trainings. It's going to take you down this web page, and over here you can see the information for the cloud solution architect. The original price is $1,200, but really for now we are putting it at I have some discount going on. So the full training is a 11 weeks training, and it's the cost is going for $960 right now. 11 weeks training, weekday classes in the evening times. Typically 2 classes per week, each spanning 2 hours each. Very, very engaging and interesting class. I think I have 1 or 2 people over here. I think Edward too is over here as well too. Let me check that out. Yeah, it's over in here as well too. So very, very engaging and practical class. You get to have practical and practical lab works every week that you work in. It's very engaging class too. So you get to have hands-on experience with me as we create this cloud resources. So definitely feel free, and I'm just going to quickly go over in here, type in my website for people who might not know it. So I'm going to put that in the group chat over there, as well as my direct number if anybody wants to reach out to me. So I'm going to have another class of this again as well. And that's my number there. My name again is Olu. So feel free to reach out with me if you have questions, you understand, regarding the masterclass or like future training interest, or if you're just curious about anything and you want to learn more, definitely feel free to shoot me a text or WhatsApp message and I'll be there to respond to you. As you can see, if you want to check out the syllabus, I still need to update the syllabus a little bit to put in some other new topics we've just added to the syllabus. But over here, you can get a good idea of what the Azure Cloud Architect solution training that I offer covers, in full scope. So you have all of the syllabus there, all the tools and technologies you're going to be expected to use, just like I walked through it in the beginning of this training. You're going to see each specific areas, such as security, storage, networking, monitoring, as well as databases and all other places over there. And you can walk through all of those details. If you also wanted to have an idea of how much cloud solution architects are earning, I think I really love cloud solution because especially in Azure, almost every Azure job is all 6 figures. So you can click over here. I do have a price here, but I wouldn't really, because it changes, because I got that from Glassdoor salary and their data changes. It's a real-time data, so they update it frequently. So you can see over here, cloud solution architects easily make at least 150 to 233K. Very, very easy role. As you can see, what we've been doing all this, clicking buttons, configuring and administering. Pretty direct and easy for you to land these job roles, and they pay very, very, very well. You can see some top companies over here that are paying. You see NetApp, you see Microsoft, Oracle. I like Oracle. I started my IT career there with Oracle and Microsoft SQL databases back in 2008. And so all of these companies pay pretty good. If you want to take a look at it from the job market perspective, Azure is doing fantastically well. There are 2 or 3 main reasons, because number one, we're talking about Microsoft. They are tech giant, you understand? There are a lot of things they defeated Oracle in. I used to be someone back in the days, I'm talking about 15 years ago. I used to love Oracle database a lot. What's someone saying? Clicking button sense, I don't understand that. So I was trying to, what I was trying to say over here, Microsoft, they've been in the tech market for a very long time. A lot of in fact, I was just reading somewhere today. I think they said about 57% of Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft technologies. So when you have all of these big companies using Microsoft technologies and everyone is moving to the cloud now, it doesn't make any sense to be on premise, right? So when we go over there and companies are trying to move to the cloud, all of them are going with the stack of technology they know, which is Azure. So if you were to go to your LinkedIn or Dice or any other job portal and you, for example, just type in just even Azure, you'll be able to see thousands of roles. I'm seeing about 63,155 roles in here for different Azure roles over here: Azure engineer, Azure consultant, Azure data engineer. You understand? So you want to type that, you want to type Azure cloud, you see all of the job opportunities in there. Let's see, that's still around 63,000. Compared to companies, to other solutions, like if I used to teach AWS before, I just kind of stopped it because it didn't make sense. Because my own gain is to have you do the training and then get a job. So I typically don't navigate towards where there are not much job opportunities. As you can see over there, that is limited to just 631. So you can always do a test. Everyone has a LinkedIn account and you see the same results right there in the United States. So Azure is just doing fantastically well. Great technology, very dependable, and of course, all the big companies in the world are using it. So when you put your resume out there, so another important part, when I finish my IT trainings, I typically perform 3 free say 3 free programs for people, right? So the first is I help you make up a free resume, very, very, very powerful resume. All the people have been creating resume from, they see the difference in 1.5 weeks. You will just see the difference. You understand, and you'll be getting opportunity, and it's now left for you to prove those interviewers and land your job. You understand? So create a very, very dynamic and powerful, unique resume for each of the students that finish the training. Perform what we call rigorous mock prep interviews, from the theoretical practical perspective to grill students to make sure they are confident and they feel ready for their interviews, because I know those interviews are going to just start rolling and you're going to want to be able to defend your interviews. And then I'm going to now show you job placement strategies, how you can position your resume on job boards, the information you need to put there, how you need to communicate with interviewers, sort of the responses when you finish your interview, the users, your follow back with the recruiters as well. So all of those information are provided for free for those who go through the training and finish the training. So just one thing I wanted you guys to know in mind. Now, the other thing is we really get a chance to work on some other items, such as deploying a virtual machine, but through this virtual desktop experience, you did go ahead to see what it looks like, deploying a virtual machine, right? Because if I were to go back to my portal over there and I went to what we call more services and I went to compute and I selected virtual machines, you will see we have one virtual machine over there. So I'm going to try and schedule another class, in the next coming weeks, so we can follow up on this. There's another interesting class I want to do in the near future called Cloud Security. It's going to be a very, very powerful class. We're going to look at things like application security groups, application gateways, key vaults, firewalls, multi-factor authentications, and a few other good things such as Microsoft Sentinel. So those classes are still going to be up and coming. So definitely pay attention to the groups where I'm posting this, and you get that notification when those upcoming free master classes are coming up. One other thing I wanted to show us, we just didn't have the time. I had a virtual machine, another virtual machine set up in form of it's supposed to be our on-premise where we're going to deploy, right? So this is another Windows virtual machine you're basically seeing over here that as, I was trying to get that environment already for our deployment to the cloud, but we just didn't have enough time for this as well. Yep, someone mentioned that, Bambo mentioned that private endpoint, so that's another one I would be jumping into as well under the cloud security class. So, a lot of interesting things to sort of look into over here. Give me a second over here. Let me see this. So we're going to schedule it. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we round up this session? Thanks very much, guys. Very, very interesting session. Very, very interesting questions as well too. I think I liked every question that sort of came out from this particular session, as well as the individuals in the chat. And thanks for the people who are in my current training that joined as well also too, as well as the guys that just finished. Does anyone have any last minute question before we round up this session? Okay, guys, thanks. So I think we'll wrap it up from here. Definitely know if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll follow up on that, all right? Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining and hope you've learned something new and interesting, and hoping to see you soon again in our other masterclasses or IT trainings. Thank you.